Hello everybody and welcome to the second episode of James v. James. So, for those of you who don't know or haven't watched this show just yet, this is the show where James and James, I am Lefty James and this is Righty James.
Hello.
Where we debate things of politics and topical matters. Today's episode is going to be about the EU and Brexit.
Oh, see, this is a Leviathan.
We're tackling the big ones. Now, with the previous episode, transgender issues and sexualities, we were a bit outsider on it because neither of us is transgender, but this is our prime territory. This is economics, this is theories of globalism and nationalism, so we are right in the mix of it for this.
This is what we want to go for, really.
Yeah,
this is what we're
the less controversial things in general, I would say.
Yeah, of course, I find the transgender issue pretty interesting.
You're just going to broach on people's egos and issues, like when you get into this stuff. This is the stuff.
But this is the stuff which is...
This is the stuff that affects everyone. This is the political stuff that is literally policy across the board that's going to change everything. So
I mean, the country is completely divided.
It is. This is one of the issues that
fractured our society.
I really wish that we had this series going when Brexit was still on the table, when it was still a question before the referendum.
I think we'll go through this. I wasn't so solidified about.
We'll talk about our historical positions. I mean, do you want to go through where you were? What was your position leading up to Brexit?
Sure. So, at one point when I was actually pretty young, maybe 15, 16, I'm 23 now, I look about 45.
Oh, we're both fucking old.
Yeah. People in their 40s are going to hate us, aren't they? So I was properly for the whole Brexit thing in my early teens. As I went to university, university is a very kind of lefty place.
They almost saved you, but then you fell off the pale.
Well, they almost dominated my way of thinking, and almost
we almost got him, guys. We almost had him
in a 1984 style. Almost completely destroyed my.
He's bald. He could have had a beard. He could have been a proper Marxist. I could
have been a Luddite. Yep. But no, I decided to find the light or the dark side in a fun way. So I became a bit more sceptical of the whole Brexit thing and the whole UKIP fiasco. I kind of felt though towards the end I was just not sure. I was hearing the arguments of people that I met in cafes and waiters, and I'm a bit of a sado, so I'd ask people, what do you think? Right. I'd ask taxi drivers, what do you think? Oh. And everyone who I saw was working a real job. Was for Brexit. Okay,
we're hoping to make this something that's profitable.
Really,
I don't think we should be calling shit on people who don't have.
But they do real jobs. I mean, taxi driver or a guy who works in a cafe is a tough job.
Salary jobs. Okay, yeah, sure.
You're working a lot for almost a low wage. It's a tough job. When I went to university, though, everyone I spoke to, the professors, the students, everyone was. Absolutely, Brexit is the epitome of evil. These guys are Nazis. Can I call
Godwin's law yet?
I'll just finish what.
Okay.
So when I cast my ballot, you'd be surprised. I casted Remain, but I felt pressured into doing that.
You ruined my joke.
I felt ashamed.
I was hoping that you had voted Brexit, and I could ask if you had regrexed it.
Regrexed it.
Regrexed
it. God.
I had it on the table. I was ready to go. I would have won by default, but no.
Sorry.
I guess I could ask
I'm
if
a massive party pooper. I'm sorry.
I feel like I guess I can still ask you that. Do you regret your vote?
I absolutely regret my vote.
Okay, yeah, we're back on board. We're on the table again.
If I could go back and have some sort of personal integrity, I would have voted for Brexit, because the moment I cast my ballot and sat down,
you're like the opposite of a lot of people.
I know,
because a lot of people do regret voting for Brexit now that the circumstances are actually coming out and it's becoming clear what Brexit is going to look like.
Well, the stats are not quite on your side there.
Well, we'll get into those.
We will, but yeah, so I basically changed my mind entirely, and I'm a full, proud Brexiter.
Right.
Brexiteer, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
Your turn.
Sure. So, no surprises here. I pretty much from the beginning thought that this was a dumb idea. It was not in any way going to help Britain. It was not going to help us as a country or in the future. I obviously voted for Remain. I had no qualms about it. I did a lot of research because I did find some of the Brexit arguments interesting. My dad actually voted for Brexit, so we had a lot.
What a Nazi!
No, he was looking at it from an economic argument. He didn't give a shit about the immigration side of it. He was purely looking at it from the economic side. I disagree with those economics, but we had these great debates about this kind of stuff. And he would bring up stuff that I would then look up. So I wasn't just in a complete echo chamber. I was listening to this stuff, but yeah, me and my friends were very much against this, and obviously being in uni, in film school, in media, like especially very left leaning.
Right.
And yeah, the morning after Brexit, me and my friends met up, and we did have this conversation like, so exit strategies. Like we were planning to leave. We were about.
Were you gonna go to America?
Yes,
Yeah.
well, this was pre. This was pre.
on.
Remember, this was pre-Trump. Like we thought Hillary was going to get in, and we thought that the argument we had was, or the thing that I was saying at that point was, well, the UK looks like it's heading down the shitter. It's going down the wrong way. America's behind us. It doesn't have an NHS or anything yet. But I thought, oh, well, they're going to vote in Hillary. They're going down the right way. They've had Obama for 8 years. They're going down the liberal path. Everything's going to be better. And then November rolled around, and I was mortified. And I ended 2016 so sad. and it's been, I've got to say, I'm so glad that our election in June turned out the way it did, that the Conservatives didn't get the overwhelming majority that they got. They didn't go past the post.
They didn't go past the post, 100%. Yeah, no. You're right, but they still are better than Blair did. Right?
Well,
in his second election, I believe.
Well,
I'll be fact checked on that.
Anyway,
that's
in terms of numbers, yeah, but
it's a minor point.
But yeah, it was the one bit of validation that I'd gotten in years that the left had actually not done.
I remember being really pissed off when that happened.
Oh, I stayed up and I was so happy.
Not that I'm that actually fond of the current Tory party, but I dislike Jeremy Corbyn and the Labourites.
Well, that's another thing to get onto, or just talking about the EU campaign, how each side did. But that was the one thing where I was like, okay, thank God the Conservatives they've lost, they haven't won definitively at the very least, but it's now been watching them rush through this comedy of errors. I don't think that they'd do much better if they had a majority, but they don't have a proper mandate.
Okay, this is a debate from the top.
Oh but I'm just saying, up until now, it's been fun watching that, and and that's my position. It's been fun watching Brexit
I can see
collapse and kind of validate my points. Onto the point of the EU in general, though, because this is the other thing that I want to get your opinion on, is the EU in general. Because it's all well and good talking about Brexit and whether we should be in the EU, but what's your opinion of the institution itself?
Okay, so I believe that institutions are built for certain eras. So the EU was built for a post-war era, where Germany and the Allies fought over for world dominance, almost, at least European dominance. So what's going on with the EEC at the time? It was a brilliant idea. It was making the coal mines of France and Germany a shared enterprise, so that France can accumulate its resources and attack Germany with Britain's help, or Germany can accumulate its resources and attack France with Britain's help. It was about making the resources shared. That was a fantastic idea. Perhaps that one small factor stopped another war breaking out in Europe.
That is the thing. Yeah, we went the entire rest of the 20th century without another war, and to this day, which is fantastic. It's
really
very
is remarkable.
It's very unlikely that for the next century that Europe will break out into any another war.
I disagree on that, but that is remarkable in itself. So that was great. Okay, so the idea that there'd be all the nations would join together and agree on certain economic policies, I think was a great idea. And it was a great idea for its time. Now, however, things have changed. We have the internet. We have increased globalization. We also have easier shipping routes, and things move around the globe faster. I don't think the EU is suited for the modern world. I don't think the EU is democratic enough for the modern world. I think the EU is too basic for the complexity and the population booms of Europe. I don't think the EU is actually good for anyone. Not even the Germans, who actually have benefited a lot from it, probably the most over anyone. But I don't think the EU is actually good for anyone. I think that actually the world is better globalized rather than a regional.
Right, sure.
Rather than just a whole bunch of regions all fighting for their own particular region. I think the world should be truly global.
I sort of agree with you on a lot of the individual facts about that. I think I come to a very different conclusion about it, because I do agree with you. Yeah, it's not nearly as democratic as it should be. It's not been formed well over the last couple of decades. I think that could have been a lot more management. And yeah, I think as in its current form, it's probably not fit for purpose of what it's meant to be doing. Now, your version of it would be to leave it and for it to collapse, preferably. I would prefer starting the more official measures of nation building, like actually going on a federal level, like not necessarily giving Europe its own full powers, not letting it be a full-on nation, but just like a clearer structure, a parliament that was worth a shit, that was clearly understood in terms of what measures it had, a president who was actually elected by the people, or at least some kind of council or something at the top that could be clearly understood. And something that was a lot more measured than it is right now, because right now they've got the euro, which I will admit it would be good if they had a unified monetary and financial policy, but right now they've got a single currency and many different financial policies, which is, that's caused problems with Greece. It's obviously, and that's something that does hurt Germany. Germany would like to be able to control their currency a bit more for their own economy, and that would probably help them more. But the EU, it has its problems. I think us leaving it, though, going back to the Brexit point, it's not helping us, and I don't think it's helping Europe to do that, because the situation we've got ourselves into with the EU, imperfect as it is, I think had potential, and it still has potential if we actually worked at it, but leaving it as it is, it's only going to hurt us. At least that's my personal opinion of it.
Okay, so your idea is that we stay in the EU and reform it. Okay.
Yeah, we're one of the founding members. We're the only ones who actually had the opportunity to really do that in that situation.
Okay, so how do you do that when you're one of, I believe, 28 members?
There's a lot of members.
We're gonna be fact checked shit here.
No, that is about right.
28 members, I believe.
Yeah,
we're one of 28 members. It's not this isn't the Security Council of the UN where there's 7 nations who decide the fate of the policy, which the UK is obviously on one of those. It has a seat at the council. That doesn't matter. Slovenia has as much say as we do.
Well, yeah, there is.
Slovakia has as much, not in terms of power politics, but officially they do. So, if one member state, one of the biggest member states, a second to France or Germany, maybe third, decides to leave, does that benefit the smaller nations? Now, this is something that we really need to start the discussion off on, because I actually think that the EU is set up in a way which benefits certain member states over others. I don't see the world as a fair political ball game. I see the world as a play of power politics, and I think that people like Germany, people like France, do pretty well out of these things. The UK is kind of like the husband of the marriage who doesn't want to fully integrate and commit. So ironically, as one of the biggest players, we haven't really been a part of this.
We have been a part-timer.
Some nations, the bigger nations, can bully the smaller nations and say, hey, look, if you're not going to actually approve our budget here, we won't approve yours. We won't invest in your country if you don't vote with us in the EU. And Germany has a hell of a lot more power than the Czech Republic. Germany has a hell of a lot more power than places like Portugal. Okay, or Spain, where the unemployment for people under 26 is almost 50%. So I'm saying to you, is this a good institution that we really want to be part of? Or are people better kind of receding from it and actually having their own sovereignty and deciding their own laws?
Well, I think going into the future, bigger institutions like that are going to be necessary for the kind of problems that we're going to be dealing with. We need international agreements on stuff like climate change and trade and everything and how we exactly want to manage refugee stuff. Like the Syrian refugee crisis is an excellent example of, as a more unified federal state, or at least as a union that could actually make agreements on stuff that were actually legally binding and effectual, the Syrian refugee crisis could have been solved significantly more easily. It could have actually been handled, but instead it's been allowed to grow into this horrific mess because none of the countries want to agree with each other. They all have varying levels of power that are very unclear, and it's led to this much larger issues.
Why?
Now, well,
I'll let you finish.
Well, yeah. For example, if it was like the United States, or if it was some kind of unified council at the top that could say, okay, we understand that because right now the border countries, they're the worst hit by the recession, and they're the ones. And they're the ones having to suffer because the way the EU works is a refugee arrives at the border, they have to stay in the border country. Right now, that's a major issue. So if countries like Germany and the UK just agreed, okay, we understand your countries are suffering a bit more, we will disperse these refugees and manage them properly, no country would have to take in exceptional amounts of refugees, and it would be not even a problem for each individual country to manage that. And then it could be something that would be, worked out over the course of the years. Right now, it's been allowed to turn into this crisis. And that's the kind of stuff that happens when you just have countries that are completely disunified.
Okay, but you're looking at the results rather than the source of the conflict. Why are these countries disunified? But why don't they agree on these things? Do you think that Hungary has the same culture as Germany?
Hungary and Germany are pretty
the UK
are pretty close.
No, they're not. They're completely different cultures.
Well,
Hungary has a lot more influence from the Asian Mongolian hordes. Hungary actually is a country which is vehemently against mass-scale immigration or refugee influx. Germany, obviously because of its colourful history, has turned to the other extreme, I believe. Germany seems to be a country of extremes to me. There's no middle ground, almost. But that's a discussion for another day. But I think what you're saying here is that people need to unify, and we need a federal system. But this isn't the United States. This isn't a continent that has grown up over hundreds of years through social developments where people actually have a shared set of values. Europe is firstly, it's more densely populated than America. There's almost 1.2 billion people in Europe. There's 300 and 400 million people in America.
From what estimate? I've heard maximums are like 400 million.
No, there's almost 1 billion people in Europe.
Hi, this is James from the Future in Editing. Just a quick correction. It turns out both of us were wrong. It seems that the population in Europe is around 750 million. So we were both wrong by about equal amounts. But yes, Europe is more densely populated than America. So James was right on that mark. Continue with the episode now.
That'll be fact checked.
Okay, sure.
But leave that point aside for now. Europe has grown up over thousands of years. Okay? It's not the same as the US. You can't just say, okay, these people have a shared culture. They don't. I mean, I just to give an example. Okay, I spent a month hiking across Spain. Okay, all right. The culture was a different world to the UK. It's a different work-life balance, different economy, different ways of viewing the world entirely. How can you have a shared system of values and a shared political system when people radically disagree on a basic framework of existence? So you're saying to me, you know what, if only Europe was more unified, we wouldn't have this refugee problem. Okay, this goes back to the communist argument. If only the world was better than it is, communism would work. It's not going to work. Europe is completely divided. It's a completely culturally diverse system, and you can't force that.
Well, I
government.
think what we're seeing right now is that the rest of Europe is becoming an ever closer union, and we are the only ones kind of opting out of that.
No.
The rest of the countries are staying. They have obviously that every country is going to have its own movement that is against Europe, but so far we've seen in elections over the last year those ones have been defeated. It's Marine Le Pen. I forget the name. Geert Wilders in
But they're extremists, though. That's different to saying I'm skeptical of Europe.
I guess,
versus,
but
I'm going to vote for a Nazi.
Yeah,
no one's going to do that.
The point is that the if there is anger against Europe, it's certainly not enough to appoint those kinds of people. It's an underground thing. It's not the mainstream.
But Trump isn't Marine Le Pen, and Nigel Farage isn't Marine Le Pen. Okay. The European versions of what we've had here, if you want to loosely connect them, aren't on the same level of extreme. Okay, and I think what you're saying here. Okay, I'm throwing out some disgusting anecdotal evidence here.
Right,
but
sure.
When I was in Greece, I was chatting to people. Everyone hated Europe. Everyone, as in the EU. Not
I can
Europe
definitely
as a
understand
continent.
why Greece would come to that conclusion. Like I said, Greece has had major issues with it.
Greece are under the thumb of EU or the power players of the EU, which is France and Germany, mostly Germany.
Well, this is where I say that it would be better if there
is their democracy?
If there were, well, this is my point. Is it would be better if they had a single monetary policy that, like in America, they understand that there are poorer parts of America that absolutely take in more tax than they give out. A lot of the southern states are like that, and America understands that that's just going to happen because they are a unified country. And if that was something that was happening in Europe, Germany would be sending, like, the money would be circulating a lot more freely, and they would be supporting the people in those countries with a single understood monetary policy of just like, okay, this part is suffering a bit more, let's help it. Like, that's something that would be helping.
I think the difference between the US and the Europe here is that actually the US has a shared culture Of course, the US is in some ways more diverse than Europe.
Yeah,
but the US is generally a shared culture when it comes to capitalism, work ethic, building companies.
You think?
Creating wealth. I think so. I think the reason why the South and the North are so different is because of its history. Obviously, that's the discussion.
Well, the South and North are quite different, but also, apart from... I will give you that, obviously, Europe has several different languages. That's one thing that does make it quite...
More than that. It goes back to... Sorry,
sure,
God, I didn't interrupt.
But in terms of America, you've got California, you've got the West Coast, you've got East Coast divide. There's the South, obviously. There's the Appalachian regions that are more close to Canadian kind of socialism. There's very different politics across the board. It's not necessarily a unified culture, and many of them there are people who kind of want to secede within Texas and California. So yeah, any country, any unified federal system is going to have massive diversity, especially over the size of a continent. But that's the kind of stuff you even out in the process of making a federal system. Europe, is coming at it a bit backwards because obviously America kind of became a federal system on its own in the beginning. Europe is having to construct it from clay and everything.
But it evolved. America was a new nation which evolved into a federal system. Had a bloodthirsty war. Almost 600,000 people died to determine whether it was a confederate or federal system. Okay. Europe has been around for, in the way that we vaguely understand it, since the collapse of Rome, 1,500 years. These developments are much longer and slower, and are much more ingrained in the culture. So you're saying to me, okay, well, there should be a single monetary value. How much is a pizza in Germany compared to a pizza in Greece? You can't compare it. How is the service in Germany of the German work ethic compared to Greece? You can't compare it. What about the quality of the cars? What about the quality of the government and the way they initiate they institute their taxation? You can't compare it. So what you're doing is you're creating these countries which have evolved slowly over millennia, completely differently, putting them into one political system which is flawed in so many ways, and saying this should work. And if you're not part of it, then you're a recluse. I'm sorry, but that's crazy to me.
Well, this is where you're describing these people like they're completely alien species to each other. Like they're shared cultural values of democracy. They've all evolved. They've all evolved from.
Essential component of democracy is paying your taxes properly. Was it 90% of Greeks didn't pay their swimming pool tax? Yeah, and a lot of Greeks have swimming pools.
Yeah, we shouldn't have let Greece into the EU. That was a bad decision.
Okay,
yeah.
So we got to the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
So what you're saying then, you're conceding almost that some countries aren't designed to be in political and economic union.
Greece lied to get in. Like they fudged their.
And again,
their
another reason why we shouldn't let countries like this in. If you were talking about France, Britain, Germany, and most of Scandinavia and Sweden, okay. I could get that. I'm on board with that, actually.
Okay.
I would be less inclined to share our political union, but an economic union, more open borders with immigration and more kind of flex policy with immigration. Okay. But no, not the Eastern Bloc, the post-communist bloc, not what they so unceremoniously called the pigs, right? Portugal, Italy, Greece, Spain.
I've not even heard
what
that acronym.
Phrase.
That's
what
fucking,
a horrible
That's
phrase.
fucking terrible. Whoever came up with that, that's bad. Jesus.
It's terrible. But it's made in jest almost.
Jesus.
It's tongue in cheek. But there's a reason why it's called that. It's because of the rampant corruption.
Yeah.
You can't amalgamate these cultures. You can't.
I think that's a bit pessimistic. I think it could be done. It is just something that would require extensive work and
Who does
effort.
the work though?
Well, that's something that, if these countries agree to be in the Union and we agree that they should be in the Union, it is something that should be enforced, from an actual federal
America
system.
enforced democracy in Iraq. You can't force people to change their culture. Cultures are organic things which evolve over time. You can't say the government policy is this, the political agenda is this.
Well, this is why
culture will change.
Yeah, this is why
in response.
This is why the EU
It doesn't work like that.
The EU with their ever closer union, that rhetoric is never in terms of you've got to agree to a political union now. It's not even remotely. It's gradualism. It's basically, look, maybe we'll get to a political union at some point. It's basically just we need to put this together over time, improving our economic ties, making our own system better, and maybe eventually get to these points if we all agree on them, hence the veto powers. Like, it's meant to be over the course of perhaps 100 years. Like,
okay, veto powers. That's another issue. They're pretty weak. If you're one nation, again, I'll go back to Slovenia. How much power does Slovenia have over veto power? I'm Slovenia. I have no political or economic or military influence. Hey, Germany, I disagree with you. I want to veto this. Okay, you're 1 out of 28. Good luck. And if you do that, we're not going to support your economic policies in the future. You want investment? Good luck, mate. I'm sorry, but the system is so corrupt.
We could definitely argue over, is it good for the smaller countries? Because, they have had a brain drain of people leaving their countries and coming to Britain and coming to other countries. So that's arguably bad for them. We can talk about that side of it. But this is a good springboard onto Brexit itself. Like, was the EU good for us? And is it good for us? It
was. It was.
Yeah. Wait, what?
Back in 1970.
There we are. Back on board. Back on board. You scared me.
Back post-war period to maybe the 90s. It was.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. Okay. It actually stopped more war. Britain had to get involved with the war of the continents, as did America. Ultimately, without the US and the UK, the continent would have fell to Nazism. The fact that we don't have to meddle in those kind of military affairs again is beneficial to us. Okay, we can be our island. But in terms of actually where we are now, Brexit was absolutely the right decision for the country.
What are you basing that on?
Number one, you have to have a global outlook in the 21st century.
Yeah.
You can't have a regional or continental outlook. In the past, you were bound by geography. Now you're only bound by your wealth and your education. The UK is a pretty wealthy and educated place. Now, we could trade with anyone we wanted. We could trade with the Chinese, we could trade with the Brazilians, we could trade with the Yanks, we could trade with the Canadians. Now, to say, actually, you must have favourable trade policies to Europeans because they're near you is a Neanderthal response to the needs and the demands of our technologically advanced age. So to say to us, well, actually no, you're moving away from the world and you're becoming more insular, is actually a mischaracterization of what Brexit was. Brexit is opening up to the world, not moving away from it.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously it is moving away from open immigration. It is moving away from connections to Europe in a certain way. Like there is some moving away from it.
I agree with that. I agree with that. We agree on those facts.
You're looking at it as, we can just trade with anyone. Like we're still the British Empire. Like that, everyone is rushing to trade with us. The UK economy is based on consumption and banking, two things that will be definitely hurt by our leaving of Europe. One of our main selling points to people outside of Europe was that we were the English-speaking road into Europe, and massive banks are threatening to leave for European soil. We're having massive inflation because the pound has dropped in value, which has caused imports to go up. We import way more than we export. These are massive costs to the economy that will radically affect us for a while. Like, any benefits that you're thinking are going to be making up ground for the stuff that we will have objectively lost. Like, it's not on the table to question. Like, that is definitely going to hurt our economy. Like, and we're talking in double-digit percentage points of how it's going to affect our economy. So any benefits you're going to bring up, those are just going to be making up ground for the next decade or two, I would say minimum, until we can talk about in the future of this is going to be overall good for the economy. And in the meantime, it's going to be just a disaster. Like, it's not something that's going to be a good time. It's not something that's going to see good dividends in any immediate future. So that's the view I went into Brexit. Like, we can talk about the EU being flawed. It definitely is. But to leave it, we are paying dramatic costs to do that.
Well, you know what, James? I agree with you on that for the short term. Just like it was an absolute atrocity what happened with Thatcher and the strikes. We actually moved on to a more efficient, modern structure of an economy through Thatcher.
I would disagree, but sure. Okay, we'll move on to...
What I'm saying is, we absolutely know now that old-fashioned ways of structuring an economy don't work in the modern economy. So you're saying to me, okay, we'll have short-term losses. Yeah, sure. It's going to be a structural kind of lag there. Okay, of course. But in the long term, actually, we'll open up to the rest of the world. There's, 7 billion people on this earth. I'd rather trade with the rest of the world than just Europe. So you're saying we'll have these massive costs to our economy. Sure. And you know what? I have the best interests of the nation at heart, and I'm happy to wait. I'm happy to wait until things pick up because I know they will. I think when we open up to the big emerging markets like India and China, and Brazil, and still the US. I mean, the US is the only modern developed Western nation which is growing.
The EU's growing. The EU's growing at like 2.5% right now, while
the
we're lagging at like 0.5%.
The EU population is actually driving down, and demography is always going to be a factor in economics. The US is the only Western nation which is actually growing demographically too. You're saying to me, okay, we're going to have a lot of costs. We're going to maybe have to pay fees. We're going to lose economic benefits. Sure, there's a lot more out there, and I think in the long term we're actually going to benefit from this. Yeah. So going on to what I was going to say earlier. I do have a global outlook with Brexit. There's this kind of mischaracterization of Brexit as we're receding from the world and we're kind of becoming like a hermit kingdom. Well, I see the European continent as a hermit continent. I see the rest of the world as being truly global and truly dynamic. Why do you think that a Czech carpenter is more qualified to come into the UK than an Indian doctor?
Well, I mean,
I think the Indian doctor would probably contribute more.
Well, yeah, it's not a matter of qualifications in that term. I mean, you don't have to have one or the other. Like, we could have immigration from Indian people if we wanted to. If we wanted,
it's incredibly difficult to come from India to the UK.
Well, then we can look at then we can argue about opening up our immigration in terms of the people outside of the EU. But we didn't need to leave the EU to do so. We
did.
How so?
Because the EU has certain regulations on that.
Right. Well,
so actually the UK can't decide its own border policy without the EU. And the difference is you can say, okay, well, we've had 200,000 Australians this year. Okay, I'm ridiculous.
Yeah, sure.
We've had 200,000 Australians. We've had almost 1 million Yanks. We've had 2,000 Ethiopians. We've had 100,000 Pakistanis. Whatever it is. Okay, we can actually decide here. Okay, well, what country is providing us with the skills we need? What country is actually not providing us with the skills we need, and we're in abundance of those skills? And which countries are actually, we're seeing a lot of crime from that immigration, from immigration from those countries. We can actually have a mature adult assessment of what's going on. With the EU, we can't. I don't care who you are, even if you're a criminal.
Well, I think
and you've been to prison for 20 years, you can come in. But the doctor from Ethiopia can't. So why is that? Is it because they're white? Is it because they're European? I'm not sure Europeans are better than anyone else. So I kind of see the world as a global thing, and this is why I'm for Brexit.
Well, I mean, I can at least understand that and wanting to have more people from outside the EU. That's a perfectly reasonable desire to have that. The argument that I was making in terms of us losing out economically, not only was that okay, we're definitely going to lose this much. What you're proposing there is a flip of a coin that could land disastrously for the UK long term. Because once that economic damage is done, the question is, will anyone want to come to the UK if the damage is sufficient enough to top? Because we were the sick man of Europe before we entered the EU. It is very possible that
come on, that's not fair. That's not fair.
If the banking
we fought the war, that's why we actually funded. I mean, France had its underground.
We had an empire. We had
we put everything into that.
We had so much more at that point than we do now. We don't have an empire anymore. Our main selling point is banking and our access to the EU.
On that point,
we may be about to lose both of those. We may be about to lose.
James,
just play with me for a second on the worst case scenario here. Because if we leave the EU, and remember, idiots are negotiating this, because your point kind of rests.
And Merkel's still there. Yeah.
Yeah. What? And from our side, we have idiots negotiating our position. So your point kind of rests on the idea that intelligent people are in the driver's seat, which they are not. So
whoa. I mean, that's an assumption.
No, but just roll with me on this. They're negotiating from a place of weakness. Literally every news story is showing this, that the negotiations are not going anywhere. And
of course, the media's going to tell you that.
Well, you have to work from something, right? If the negotiations are as bad as they say, we are in deep shit, and they are not the smartest people in the world to be able to do this. And then, at the end of this, let's say it's the full Brexit, you'd be looking at Northern Ireland leaving us, you'd be looking at Scotland doing a second referendum, you'd be looking at London literally has had the talks about, could we be an independent city-state? I know that sounds ridiculous, but stranger things have happened in the last year or so, remember this. So, we're looking at, 7 kingdoms level of split in the UK, and this was the real political price for Brexit, was we have literally exposed divides in the UK that are so toxic we could be heading for the destruction of our entire country. I know this is Project Fear level stuff, but that is the danger of unleashing Brexit? And was that worth it to hire a few more Indian doctors? Is my point.
It goes beyond that. It's hyperbolic. You're saying, okay, well, the media are saying we're coming from a moment of weakness. The media are saying they're actually all of it's gone to shit, and we have no
I would
power.
love to know this position of strength that you think that we have.
Let me just explain.
Because if we had a position of strength, it would not take a smart person to argue that, and we apparently don't have smart people arguing.
But you trust the media, and that's the difference. The media said Clinton will win. The media said Brexit won't happen. The media said the Conservatives will win. The media are a class of people. What kind of class of people are there? Are they? They are from an educated, middle to upper middle class of people who've had an easier life than the rest of us.
There's a difference between prediction and understanding what's going on now.
Generally, those are the kind of people who hold positions in media. Okay, It's not the average bricklayer. Okay, it's not the average person who works in a cafe. It's not. So you're saying to me, okay, well, the media are saying this, you're coming from a position of weakness. No, well, actually, the country doesn't agree with you. The country agreed with the people who voted for Brexit. And the country actually believe this will be a good thing for the nation.
51% of people a year ago agreed that
that's a majority. That's a majority. That's the biggest majority we've had. We've never had an election where 51% of people agreed on something. It's huge. Okay, So what I'm saying to you now is you're saying, okay, we're coming from a moment of strength. Okay, you know what? If the UK, which is the 5th strongest economy in the world, with the 4th strongest military budget in the whole world, can't make it on its own, then what bloody hell chance does Switzerland have, which has a very well functioning economy? What bloody hell chance does Ecuador have? You know, what chance does the rest? Does every country join a regional union? Is that what you're saying? If the UK can't make it, then the rest of the world is fucked.
Look, I didn't say that we would fall apart economically because of leaving the EU.
That is what you imply.
No, I'm saying that we would fall apart as a country because so many people would want to leave. I did spell a doom and gloom scenario there, but the main point is, even though, sure, we may survive as a country, we'll survive economically, the point is that we could have our standard of living radically reduced, and just from the position or in general, like, just the point is, like, if we have this massive economic problem where bankers leave the UK, where we maybe lose Northern Ireland or Scotland or both. That would drop us down the list. You say 5th in the world right now. Sure, we are. But the more and more we drop, then it could become this massive stagflation, massive recession. Like, it could be like you're betting all of these chips on the idea that we might eventually get stuff good, but I don't necessarily think that the odds are good enough on that to have risked it all on Brexit.
So you're telling me that unelected commissioners who determine the policy and put it out to and albeit elected Parliament, but unelected bureaucrats have a better idea of how to run our economy than our own elected politicians.
I think you overestimate the amount of power they have and the amount of damage supposed damage that they do. I think the regulations that they put in place have not radically affected our economy in any kind of dangerous way. I'm a lefty guy. The regulations I've seen, like, a lot of them get brought up for hyperbolic numbers and say, oh, look at all these regulations on pillows or whatever. And generally, when you actually look at the regulations that are there, this was one of the things that was brought up during the whole campaign was, oh, look, there's like 50 regulations on pillowcases or whatever, and it's like, you sleep on them, you want them to be made to a certain standard, and in terms of trading,
no, but there's a certain point where it becomes about showing people that you're doing your job. Politicians want bigger budgets. Politicians and governments want more power, and whether that's in pillow regulations or fighting wars, politicians will always push for bigger budgets. Oh, you know what? I didn't perform this year because I only got 100 million to invest in this policy rather than 200 million. Give me more money. Okay, politicians will always want to make things.
Well, I don't want to go into the deep underlying motives of the hearts of politicians. Like, I mean, my view of it is
it's essential to understand this.
No, I know, but like, the point is, I look at their actions more than anything. I mean, if you're going to complain about their actions, they could be power mad. They could be just bad at their jobs. I don't know. The
it's
point
both, isn't it? Because they've been brought up in an environment where they've probably never had to work crappy jobs. These people are generally the wealth of the nations of Europe. These people are the upper class.
Well, this is an interesting point to bring up. Is, do we think that economically, like, disregarding the regulation side of it, the immigration that's come in and the structure that it's caused, like, is the EU good for our economy in general? And I would say over the last 20 years, it has been. It, like, in terms of the immigration, it has not caused massive reducing in our economic ability. In fact, I would argue it's helped it.
For who? For who?
For the economy at large. It's like...
But who specifically in the economy?
No, as in general. Like,
I'm not... The middle and upper class will always do okay. The lower middle class will struggle, generally. But the middle to upper middle and upper class will always do well, no matter what the general economic environment is, generally. Unless you're talking about 2008, generally that's the trend. The lower class will always be competing and in a stressful, difficult environment. So who is it benefited? People like you and me, people who have degrees, people who speak and sound like you and me, or people who actually don't even have like a GCSE. These are the kind of people who are not benefiting from the EU, and that's who I'm sticking up for.
There have been plenty of studies into the long-term effects of immigration, and generally they come to the conclusion that in the short term, immigration can cause some downturn, at least in tradesman jobs, the kind of people who don't necessarily have GCSEs, but in the long term, rising tide raises all boats kind of situation where, because there's more people in the economy, they are also customers, and they also put money into the economy, and because they haven't had to, like, we haven't had to pay for their 20 years of education and healthcare, so they're coming in fresh. That we haven't had to pay for any of their existence up to that point. They end up being net contributors to tax. They pay tax. They work well. They end up being massive helps to the economy at large. Like, they are good things.
I'm not doubting the ambition of some. Okay, so there's that stereotype. If you want to get a good plumber in, you hire a Polish guy. Okay, I think it's kind of exaggerated.
Well,
I think, but it's what people say. Okay?
You can look at it
because you come to a new country, you're ambitious. If you move to the States and you don't know anyone, what can you do other than work hard and build up some wealth to be able to then go out and focus on other aspects of your life? What I'm saying here is that these people who come into the country, they don't affect you. They don't affect me. I'll never be personally affected by this.
Sure.
Okay? If anything, there'll be more plumbers to choose from that I can get a cheaper price for. You could argue better quality service. Maybe not. That's something to be contested. But for at least a cheaper price, there's more to choose from. For the guy who's been a plumber for 4 generations, that's the end of his business, really. When there's 10 people who can do a job rather than just 3 in the market, the value of your labour has decreased so significantly that actually your living is pretty much kaput. For us to sit here and say, okay, well, we need this, we want that, when actually we're not the people paying the price. That is why you get the demographic split between who voted for Brexit and who voted for Remain.
I think there are quite a few people who would see anecdotal evidence, or at least, or maybe quite a few anecdotes.
No, that's rational.
But just like you see the evidence of, okay, a Polish guy came in and he became a plumber, or he worked, like, my mum worked at a factory where she was head of HR. She did see quite a few Polish guys taking jobs that white British guys would refuse to do because they felt that they weren't getting enough money for it. They looked at it as, oh no, these Polish guys can just do this job and I don't want to get paid low money for it, and they didn't want to work their way up. Like, they could have taken these jobs but refused to do so. There are some people who...
But why are the wages lower? And the people who've been part of the British society and the British economy for generations, why are the wages low in the first place? Because you have an influx of immigrants with low skill. It's not about for immigration or against immigration. It's silly to say we don't need immigration. It's a ridiculous statement. But what you need is carefully planned immigration, where you're in control of what's coming in and what's coming out, and it's based upon the needs and the wants of the people and the economy that immigration is going to be.
Obviously, we do need immigration. We are going to see this post Brexit because our NHS runs on immigrant labour. There are a lot of doctors who are immigrants from the EU. There are a lot of seasonal labourers who pick up fruits and stuff that aren't going to be there. That's another thing that's going to impact stuff. But you're looking at it as like, okay, wages have been depressed in this area because there's more competition. Now, your response to that is close the borders to that particular type of immigrant, lock things down, and not deal with it in any other way than that, and just hope, and then just hope. Well, no, but the point is, you're saying there are immigrants.
You're mischaracterising what I'm saying, though.
No, but that is generally the argument from the right is these immigrants are the problem. Let's get rid of the immigrants.
No, but it's not. But that's what the left is saying. The right is saying. The left aren't getting what the right is saying. The right are saying, we're not against immigration. We're against mass immigration, which is unplanned.
Well, that's why I said
which destroys our livelihood.
That's why I said immigration from certain points. So like the point is to control immigration and make it a more managed and all that stuff.
Yeah.
The left position would be, okay, we've seen depressed wages in these particular areas, let's help the unions in those areas. Let's help raise the minimum wage to help people who are on the lower end. Let's add more socialized care, and then you would actually deal with those problems, and you could have the benefits of the immigration. The immigration does grow the economy. That's what the studies show. So you want to be able to protect that, and you can help it by supporting unions and making things better for the people on the bottom. Like it's
how many Morgan Freemans are there in the world?
What do you mean?
It sounds like a really crazy argument, but
it sounds like the beginning of a joke. But like, how many Morgan Freemans does it take to screw in a light bulb? Please tell me.
Morgan Freeman is a very unique actor. He's got a very unique voice. He's of high value as an actor, and there's only one of him. That's why he's worth tens of millions.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
No government legislation is going to change that. No unionization of the Morgan Freeman world is going to change.
Well, that's what unions exist for.
Unions don't work, do they?
They
that's
did.
The issue. No, they didn't.
They did, and they do
because they kept up industries which are unprofitable and unsustainable for the interests of the people, right? Who are running them, who are often taking $1 million salaries, £1 million salaries. So what you're saying here is saying, okay, well, actually, you know what? Rather than having one plumber who can fit 10 clients, who can make a really good living, we'll have 100 where everyone has to work part-time to make a pittance. We'll have unions which actually force the government to somehow legislate the economy, regulate the economy, and force the clients to pay them more. It's insane, okay? It's demand and supply. There's less people who can do your niche job, you get paid more. There's more people who can do it, your value and your worth decreases. This is basic mathematics, basic economics.
Well, I mean, you're arguing from this idea that the free market works things out fairly, and it clearly doesn't. Like, that's why unions exist.
The free market isn't perfect.
No, I know, but
it follows that trend, doesn't it?
But I forget which Scandinavian country it is. I believe it's Finland. Doesn't have a minimum wage. They have collective bargaining laws, so that there has to be unions within industries that argue for.
Finland has a tiny population.
No, I know, but
with a huge amount of resources. You can't compare those.
But
what you're saying, okay, the answer to a flooded market is further regulation. I'm saying the answer.
Well, not regulation. It's collectivized bargaining.
Or collectivized bargaining.
Yeah.
I accept that. But the answer really to that is to have the right amount of people in the market for that specific job. Okay. So look, the viewers can decide who agree with us because we're going around in circles here.
Sure.
Let's take on another.
Yeah. Sure.
Bend to this. Okay.
Or if I can throw one more wild card into it, universal basic income. Like so.
That's a topic for another debate.
Sure, but that's my bombshell.
That's your bombshell.
I don't have to argue. I don't have to argue for why I think we should keep out or keep in immigrants if everyone within our own country just has a.
But that's going to lead to all levels of insanity. But that's something else we can speak about.
That's a full episode in itself.
That's a full episode in itself. But I think the viewers can decide who sounds
less insane.
Less insane, because some people are going to think I'm mad, and some people think you're mad, but I think let them decide, and maybe
sure, definitely.
Another aspect of this, I believe democracy works better when it's small. What's the most corrupt Western democracy in the world?
Italy.
Did
I throw you off?
Yeah, you did actually. I was going to say the US. But okay,
that's a small democracy. Have I destroyed your argument preemptively?
Yeah, well, I mean, but there's okay. I like that actually. Okay, fair enough. You beat me there. Okay. However, that kind of goes back to my idea of the difference between the cultures of the Northern Europeans.
All right, fair enough. But I'll give you that one for that win.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with conceding sometimes.
Sure. Yeah.
But America's pretty corrupt.
Sure.
So America is the biggest democracy of them all. Okay, apart from India, which isn't Western, but you know what I'm saying. What I'm saying about America is you can't hold the politicians to account.
That's more an issue with they have ridiculously lax campaign laws. They allow lobbying on a mass scale. Those things can be fixed, and there are many groups pressuring for those rules to be instituted so that they don't. They're allowed to spend $1 billion on a presidential campaign. We have very tight spending laws that your lot are breaking in each election. But
you're saying my lot. I don't stand for the Tories. I stand for conservatism.
What?
The Tories
fine.
Okay.
The Conservatives. I'll remove it one, but the Conservatives Conservatives have broken our spending rules quite a lot, but in America they have basically no spending laws because they are allowed super PACs and ridiculous things. That yes, everyone agrees those things need to be fixed for that democracy to be improved. That's not a matter of its size. That's a matter of lobbying has gotten in there and messed things up. And that could happen. That could happen here. That could absolutely happen in a small democracy. That happens in, small democracies are arguably more prone to it, where there's less people in power who could actually be lobbied and derail the entire system. When you have an entire Congress, you have to lobby thousands of people in power to actively control the system. I would say that the US has arguably stayed less corrupted by money over its history because of its size than anything.
No. I mean, when you can't gather as a community, when you can't keep track of what's going on in the news, that's when democracy fails. It just does. I mean, if you look at the smallest democracies in the world, the ones largely in Scandinavia, I mean, even the German democracy is pretty damn corrupt. The EU is in my view, an empire. It's a burgeoning empire that's kind of dominating not only the smaller nations, but it's also dominating as a corporate entity in some ways. Because what happens is the big corporations can say, well, this is a massive trading bloc. I can register my company in the country which gives us the lowest tax rates here, and I'll trade across the whole block.
Yeah, Ireland. Okay. Yeah, Ireland has a lot of that. So
Ireland?
Yeah.
Right. So what I'm saying is, okay, so I think that everyone should pay their tax. Tax is something which is fundamental to a nation state. So if these companies aren't paying their tax, then why are you for that? The EU is a monster of tax evasion and a monster of corporate corruption. Why is it controversial to be against that?
Well, we've accidentally stumbled on a point, because you said that you're for globalization, you're for global companies and having trading across borders all over the world, but you don't want Europe to be in that situation. Whereas,
so you haven't got what I've said there. No, but I say if you want to, you can be from India, you can be from Ethiopia or Nigeria, and you can trade in the UK, but you pay UK tax when you're trading in the UK.
Right.
Okay? It doesn't mean you can say, oh, well, I've registered in Ireland, so therefore I can trade in France and not pay any tax. No, you pay your tax, mate. Okay? And the EU, obviously, the EU benefits big companies. And also, as you said, the brain drain of the East, taking cheap labour from the East, importing it into the West, the companies benefit overall, not the consumer, not the individual, and not the societies of Europe at large.
Right. The point I was trying to make there is that, as it is right now, corporations would be, in your version of it, would be able to register in Ireland and still trade in other. I know that you said to be able to pay to eliminate loopholes and have them pay tax in each country that they do business. Mm-hmm. It's quite hard to manage that, because having to in that version, you're effectively multiplying their corporation tax by orders of magnitude if they have to pay corporation tax in each country on each of their earnings. Because then they have to. Then it's not just one entity; they are being taxed, but essentially as if they were different companies.
Yeah, of course.
And
because they're taking money from those countries. And they're benefiting from doing trade with us. So of course they should pay tax. I
would agree with you on that. We have that point of consensus.
So why are you for the EU? Surely you should be for a nation state where we control our borders and control the countries, the companies who do business with us, and actually control what's going on within our country. Well, surely you'd want that.
Well, in terms of companies paying the tax necessary within the country that they're doing business, that's something that would be needed to be negotiated on a level of nations in Europe.
Happen. Yeah. In the US, you pay state tax, you pay federal tax.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Why can it not be like that in Europe? You pay a state tax, for each country that you do business in, and then you pay a European tax.
Because Europe was instantly created within 40 years, and America evolved over a few hundred years, and America sorted it out. Europe won't and can't. It's fundamentally broken. Societies are different. Back to my first argument.
Well, yeah, we've looked back around. This is just our fundamental different perceptions of how the EU could evolve or should evolve.
I think ultimately, James, I'm really arguing for the people of Europe. I'm not arguing for the big governments and the big corporations. I think there's this weird kind of narrative. I've lived in London for the last year. Everyone I speak to is, it's Brexit. These little peasants voting against. How dare they? So, well, actually, you're not affected by it. It's not your class of people who are really doomed by it, by the EU. And actually, no. I think there's a valid reason to vote for Brexit, and I think there's going to be a lot of good to our country when we finally get past the pain.
I mean, this is why I don't hate.
Financial
This is
pain.
why I don't hate my dad. This is why I've been able to have civilized debates with him. I don't think it's necessarily all racism, and we haven't even touched on the more toxic side of the Brexit crowd, because there was an element of it there, but I don't think it's worth even talking about, because it's not worth debating the more toxic side of it that was maybe against immigration.
Of course, that there's going to be racists everywhere.
Yeah.
But I don't think that was the main reason for it.
I'm not one for arguing, oh, we did this because of this. The point, I like to argue more on where, okay, this happened, now we're going, what are we actually going to do now that we've done it? And from that perspective, yeah, we've got very different views of how the EU is. And I would argue that I'm, for once, being the more pessimistic one here, in saying that I think the process is going to be a lot less rosy than you perhaps hope it to be, and it could lead to very disastrous results where the corporations will get everything they want, where it may end up that the negotiations they could end up, if we take the Finland route of we're in the customs union, we still have to agree to all of the things of immigration, of agreeing to EU laws, but we don't get a seat at the table, then the corporations win everything. Then we throw
Finland is a speck on the radar of the world. The UK is a major global military economic.
My point is that some people want that. Some people are saying that they want that. It's like that's their non-Brexit Brexit, where they get to say, "Oh,
well, that's weak, isn't it?
I know, but that's why I'm not happy with the arguing position of the Conservatives. That sounds like what they want. It's basically the way that they get to say, "We did it. We did Brexit."
No. You need a hard. If you're going to do Remain, you do hard Remain, and you become a federalised system. If you do leave, you do a hard leave, and you leave. Well, there's no middle ground.
Well, this is where we get to unite, because the people actually doing the negotiating are against both of us. So we get to both.
Well, for sure.
We get to both say that they're doing a bad job of it. So
and I do think if the people decided for the EU, then okay, well you have to federalise.
Yeah.
I still don't think it'd be the right thing, but if that's what the people decide,
I would agree that at least if we were to leave the EU. I would like it, you'll disagree with me on this, but I would like it if Jeremy Corbyn was at the helm, where it was actually, okay, we break off from the EU to make ourselves much, much more socialist.
Jeremy Corbyn's a really interesting character here, because he actually, he was originally for Brexit back in the day. But he kind of course...
From a socialist perspective,
he wanted National Socialism, not Nazism.
No, I know.
But you know what I'm saying? He wanted a National Socialism, which is, again, why I find it odd that the lefties are almost universally pro-Remain. I find that really weird, actually. But Jeremy Corbyn's an interesting character on this. Maybe he would be good at these negotiations. Maybe his true feelings and he won't resort to his false manner. If he actually was true to his character and went for a hard Brexit, if he was in power, maybe he would be good. I certainly don't think the Conservatives are doing a good job of it right now, because they're capitulating, they're being soft. We're here for a hard Brexit now.
I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, but I think out of the two options, us being in Europe but not being on the table, whether it's economically good or not, I just think it's going to piss everyone off, and it's going to lead to more divides and anger. And like I said, I think that would cause something like the breakup of the UK if we end up in this non-Brexit Brexit. It will make the people on your side feel that they've been betrayed by the establishment. It'll make people on my side angry, because it'll basically mean that no one got what they wanted. And yeah, it's something that would ultimately, there are people on the left who agree, okay, there's a good version of this where we do the hard Brexit, and then maybe 2022 we get Jeremy Corbyn in, or a hard-wing left-wing Labour, and maybe we can salvage this. There's a almost good version of it, yeah.
Or maybe someone who actually has an ideology and has values on the right.
Well, that's something for another day. But
really, because Conservatives are just wishy-washy right now.
Yeah, no, we can all agree. We can all agree on that. That Theresa May is bad and should leave. Yeah. So yeah, that's about around the hour mark.
Wow, I think that was a segment and a half.
Yeah, definitely. But once again, I think we landed on halfway to an agreement there.
Halfway, yeah.
But another
handshake and
yeah, good place to end.
Sure.
But thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
I should also add that I did not add on the end of the last one. Check out our Patreon, James v. James. Yeah. And you can also check us out on Twitter, which is James v. James Pod. If you want to send us some questions, we'd love to do viewer questions sometime. That would be fantastic.
We're gonna hold some votes as well.
Definitely, yeah.
Some polls. I mean.
Yeah, some votes for what the next topic will be.
Who won the argument and stuff like that.
Yes, that too.
Who sounds more rational and who ums and ahs the most.
Yes,
says
definitely.
the wrong words.
Yes, but thanks for listening, everybody.